The very last thing we're going to talk about is how we treat our water. Firstly, we're going to talk about how we treat our drinking water. So this is the water that comes out of your pipes at home. So before reaching your pipes, water that's taken from a reservoir or an aquifer is treated with chemicals to remove particulate matter, so to move any small things that are floating in there. Filtered by sand, gravel, and charcoal. Disinfected with chlorine, and tested for levels of 90 contaminants based on the standards set by the EPA. So it is definitely clean, or supposed to be clean when it's coming out of your pipes. So that's the drinking water. The other thing that we treat is we treat our wastewater. So before we start treating our wastewater, all of the wastewater, so this is the water that's not only coming out of our toilets, but also coming from showers, sinks, washing machines, dishwashers, from industry, as well as from stormwater runoff, storm drain runoff, so coming from the streets, was just put straight into the ocean. That was obviously not a very good thing for all those reasons we just talked about, for the nutrient pollution and all of that. So now we treat our wastewater. We make this water less bad before we put it out into the environment. So one way that happens a lot more in rural areas is there's what's called a septic system. So individual homes or businesses will have septic tanks out like in their backyard and it's buried in the ground. What happens is the water from the structure goes out there and the tank itself separates solids and oils from water. And so then the water travels downhill through gravel-filled trenches where pollutants can naturally decompose. So the somewhat clarified water is allowed to naturally decompose underground. And then what happens is the periodically every few years or so, the septic tank will be pumped for the remaining solids. And then that's taken to a landfill. But in urban areas, so this is around here, we have treated water. And there's actually treatment facilities that are going to do this instead of a septic system. Where I grew up in Connecticut, we had a septic tank in our backyard. But here in LA, all our water is sent to treatment facilities. So it goes through a few different processes. The first one is called primary treatment. So basically, the raw sewage enters the treatment facility. And what happens is it goes through a few screens and a grit tank, and the solid objects and the grit are removed. So because this is not just because this is any wastewater, anything that goes down a drain, whether that be the sewers in the street or your toilets or your showers or whatever, there's a lot of solid objects in there. And so those all get removed and the solids are disposed of as a landfill. This isn't really like the poop because that is dissolved. There's not solid pieces of poop floating around in here. It's all just like a murky water. So this is like the tampons or the toys or whatever that has gone down the drain. Then the water moves down to the primary clarifier. So this is what's called primary treatment. So oils, greases, and solids are removed through settling tanks and clarifiers, and it removes about 60% of suspended solids. So the suspended solids are the dissolved, mushed up poop that's in there. And from these two steps, any gases that are released are chemically treated to reduce odor, so that way it doesn't just smell like a giant toilet as this is happening. Although sometimes it does, if you've ever been near the Hyperion water treatment plant in El Segundo. So then what happens is there goes to an aeration basin where microbes consume the organic matter. Microbes meaning bacteria, so it starts to break down some of the organic matter. And then we go on to secondary clarifier. So again, so this is called secondary. This diagram isn't great. This is called primary treatment. This is called secondary treatment. And so after that, then it goes through a secondary clarifier where any remaining oils, greases, or solids are removed. Sometimes they will need to go back to some of the solids are returned to the aeration basin, to the secondary treatment, to be the bacteria that will break down the organic matter. And what's left, okay, so any solids that are removed from these three steps are called sludge. Excuse me. And so that's all basically of the human waste. and the sludge is sent to digesting vats. So basically, there's more bacteria that are going to break it down and decompose it, and now it's called biosolids. And so those biosolids will either be sent to a farm for fertilizer, which actually the city of Los Angeles owns or used to own a bunch of farms where they would just send all of this. That way they were making some money off of everything they were doing. So it'll either be sent to a farm or burned or sent to a landfill, and then any gases can be used to generate electricity. And the water, once all the solids are removed, is treated with chlorine or UV light, and also filtered another time with coal, sand, and or disinfected. And so that is the water that then is now it's released to the ocean or to the river or to the lake, and it's not harmful anymore. Some cities are using the reclaimed water for to water things like lawns and golf courses, for irrigation, or to cool down power plants. If you've ever been someplace where it says like don't drink the water, we're using recycled water by the sprinklers, that's what that means. They're using what came in from the pipes, all the sewage, and is now clean. It's not up to drinking standards, but it's clean enough to use to water plants. So there are or naturally, wetlands have been good at purifying water before there were even treatment plants. It's an ecosystem service they provide. And because of that, some engineers have begun manipulating wetlands or constructing new wetlands to help cleanse wastewater. So basically, after it's gone through the primary and secondary treatment, the wastewater would be dumped into a wetland where the naturally occurring microbes would decompose the remaining pollutants. And the wetland treated water can then naturally percolate down into groundwater, replenishing the aquifers. So not only are we not pumping water out into the ocean, but we're also we're keeping our freshwater system alive.